The alarms in the palace were not loud. They were soft chimes, almost gentle, the kind of sound designed not to frighten children. That is why, when I heard 3 of them ring together, I knew something was wrong before anyone else did. My name does not matter much in this story. To the court, I was simply the human. I had come to this world 2 years ago, one of the first from Earth, chosen for a service exchange program between our people and the Queen's kingdom. I was not a soldier. I was not a diplomat. I bathed 2 small children, brushed the fine blue scales behind their ears, and told them stories about dragons and space whales until they fell asleep. That was my whole job. I was good at it, and I loved it, though the palace staff often smiled when they said my title out loud, as if it were something small. The Queen had left 3 days earlier for a summit on a neighboring station. Before she left, she knelt down to my height, which she rarely did for anyone, and said, "Watch over them, the way you always do. That is enough for me." I promised her I would. That morning, the children, Ilan and Sael, were playing with a set of star charts I had drawn for them using old Earth constellations. Ilan, the older one, insisted that the shape I called the Hunter looked more like a teapot. Sael just laughed and agreed with whatever her brother said, the way younger siblings do. Then the chimes rang. Once, twice, a third time. I had lived in this palace long enough to learn its rhythms. 1 chime meant a weather warning. 2 meant a diplomatic arrival. I had never heard 3 chimes together, not once in 2 years. The children did not react, because they did not know the meaning either, but the air itself seemed to change. The hallway lights dimmed for half a second, then returned. A small thing. Most people would not have noticed. I had spent 2 years noticing small things. It was the only skill I had that no one else valued. "Stay here," I told them gently, keeping my voice calm so they would not sense my worry. "I am going to check something in the hall." I stepped out and found the corridor empty. That alone frightened me more than any alarm. There were always at least 2 guards stationed near the nursery wing. Always. I walked further and found their posts abandoned, a communicator device left blinking uselessly on the floor. I did not have any weapon. I did not have any training in combat. What I did have was 2 years of walking every hallway, storage room, and servant passage in this palace, while carrying sleeping children to their beds. I knew this building better than most nobles who had lived here their whole lives, because nobles do not walk quietly through service corridors at midnight. I did. I heard heavy footsteps then, coming from the main hall, moving with purpose toward the nursery wing. I did not wait to see who they were. I ran back inside. "We are going to play a game," I told Ilan and Sael, keeping my tone light even as my heart pounded. "A quiet game. The quietest game we have ever played." Ilan, who was 9 and sharp for his age, looked at my face carefully. "This is not a game," he said. "No," I admitted, "but I need you to trust me the way you always do at bedtime. Can you do that?" He nodded. Sael reached for my hand. I moved them into the old reading nook behind a bookshelf, a space I had discovered months ago while looking for a blanket Sael had hidden there as a joke. The shelf could be pushed halfway across the opening from the inside, hiding it almost completely, unless someone knew exactly where to look. I had shown the children this space before, calling it the secret ship, a place we pretended was a starship hiding from space pirates in our bedtime stories. Now the story was becoming real, and I hated that fact more than I had words for. "Stay in the ship," I whispered, "no matter what sounds you hear outside. Do you understand?" Sael's eyes were wide, but she nodded. Island squeezed her hand and nodded too. I slid the shelf closed and turned to face the room, my back straight, my hands empty, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it could be heard down the hall. The door to the nursery opened a moment later. 2 armored figures stepped inside, scanning the room with quick, practiced movements. They were not palace guards. Their armor bore no house symbol I recognized, which told me they belonged to someone who did not want to be recognized at all. "Where are the children?" one of them said, his voice flat and cold. "Gone," I said, standing in the middle of the room, deliberately in their path. "Moved this morning, security change, ordered before the Queen left." It was not true, but I said it as steadily as I could, because I had learned something from years of managing tired, cranky children at bedtime. Confidence matters more than volume. People believe what is said calmly far more than what is shouted. The first intruder studied me. "You are the human servant." "I am," I said. "And you are standing in a nursery that has already been cleared. Whatever you came here for, it is not in this room." He took a step closer, clearly deciding whether to believe me. I used that moment. I reached back casually, as if adjusting a shelf, and instead knocked over a tall standing lamp between us. It crashed down loudly, and both intruders instinctively looked toward the noise. I used that second of distraction to grab a heavy woven rug from the floor and throw it over the nearest one's head and shoulders, then shoved him hard into his companion. They stumbled together, tangled for a moment in cloth and confusion. I did not stay to see if it worked. I ran, shouting as loudly as I could, out into the main hallway, away from the nursery, away from the children. If they were chasing something, I wanted them chasing me. "Over here!" I yelled, my voice echoing down the stone corridor. "The human is over here!" It worked. Footsteps thundered behind me. I ran past the grand hall, through a servant's passage I knew led in a wide circle back toward the guest wing, buying time, leading them away, hoping desperately that somewhere in this palace, real guards were waking up to the danger. I was not fast. I was not strong. But I knew every turn, every low doorway that a taller armored person would need to duck through, every loose tile that made a warning sound if stepped on quickly. I used all of it. I ducked through a doorway built for servants, low and narrow, and heard a solid thud behind me, as one of my pursuers misjudged the height. Still, they were gaining. My chest burned. My legs ached. I turned a final corner and found myself in a dead end, a storage room lined with cleaning supplies and folded linens. I had made a mistake. In my panic, I had taken the wrong turn. The door burst open behind me. I grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy metal bucket, and swung it as the first intruder came through the doorway. It connected with enough force to make him stumble back into the hallway, but the second one was already moving past him, faster than I expected, and grabbed my arm hard enough that I gasped. "Enough," he said. "Where are they?" I said nothing. He raised his other hand, and for one terrible second, I believed this was where my story ended, in a linen closet, having failed the only real promise I had ever made. Then the entire hallway lit up with bright white emergency light, and a voice I knew rang out, sharp and commanding, echoing off the stone walls. "Release my servant, or you will not leave this palace conscious." The queen had returned. I learned later that her convoy, still an hour from arrival, had received a garbled emergency signal and diverted immediately, her personal guard moving faster than protocol technically allowed. She arrived not through the front gates but through a side entrance normally reserved for supply transports, and she came in with a full detachment of real palace guards behind her, weapons ready, faces grim. The intruder holding my arm let go immediately. Both of them were surrounded within seconds, disarmed, restrained, the entire failed plot collapsing in the space of a single minute. The queen did not look at them for long. She looked at me. "Where are my children?" she said, and for the first time in 2 years, I heard real fear in her voice. "Safe," I said, my legs finally giving out slightly with relief, though I forced myself to stay standing. "The reading nook, behind the third shelf. I told them not to move for anyone but you or me." She was already moving before I finished speaking. I followed as quickly as my tired legs allowed, and when we reached the nursery, she pushed the shelf aside herself, her hands shaking slightly, something I had never seen from her before. Ilan and Sael were exactly where I had left them, huddled together, silent, obedient to the last moment. When they saw their mother, they both began to cry, the sound finally breaking free after being held in for so long. She gathered them into her arms without a single word, holding them the way any parent would, royal or otherwise. It was several minutes before she looked up at me again. I was standing near the doorway, unsure whether to stay or give the family privacy, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with running. "You held them," she said quietly, "alone, against armed soldiers, with nothing but a bucket and your own feet." "It was not enough to win," I said honestly, "only enough to delay." "It was enough," she said. "Delay was exactly what was needed. Delay was everything." She did something then that I did not expect. Something that I was told, afterward, had not happened in living memory. She lowered herself to one knee, in front of her own children, in front of her arriving guards, and bowed her head slightly toward me, a human servant with no title, no rank, and no weapon beyond a willingness to stand in a doorway. "You are not just a caretaker of my children," she said. "You are their protector. From this day, you will be recognized as such, in this house, and in every house that answers to mine." I did not know what to say. I had only done what I promised. I had only stood where I was needed. I had not felt brave while it was happening. I had only felt afraid, and determined not to let that fear decide anything for me. Later that night, after the palace had been secured, and the guilty house had been named and confronted, I sat once more beside two small beds, finishing the bedtime story we had left unfinished that morning. Ilan asked if the hunter constellation had ever been afraid before facing something bigger than himself. "I think everyone is afraid sometimes," I told him. "Being brave does not mean feeling no fear. It means staying anyway, for the people who need you to stay." Sile was already asleep by the time I finished. Ilan nodded slowly, his eyes growing heavy, and within a few minutes, he drifted off too. I sat there a while longer, in the quiet, in the soft light of a palace that had almost fallen that day, and thought about how strange it was that the smallest, most overlooked person in any room is often the one closest to what matters most. Strength did not save that palace. Weapons did not save it either. What saved it was simply someone who refused to leave, standing quietly between danger and the ones who could not yet protect themselves.